Welcome back to Turner Farm, where we work hard and play hard and enjoy sharing our little slice of heaven tucked away in the hills of rural Nova Scotia. Thanks for joining me as I share lots of sourdough tips and tricks and parts of our life here on the farm. Today, we are going to learn how to make a 4-ingredient homemade caramel with just milk, sugar, butter, and water. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more recipes like this one. Into the Christmas season, and that means that everyone loves to have candies and chocolates kind of in little dishes dotted around the house, whether they're like wrapped chocolates like a Quality Street or a hard candy. And so we are definitely a family that we always have baked goods around the house at Christmas time, but we aren't a family that has a lot of candy. However, we love a caramel. So instead of going out to the grocery store and spending way more on a box of caramels, I'm going to teach you how to make homemade caramels with just 4 ingredients, and you can wrap them up in these cute little parchment paper. You can gift them to your friends. You can put them in dishes around the house just to have as a quick kind of like sugar fix around the holiday season. But this is a really easy recipe. It's just 4 ingredients in a pot on the stove, and you bring it together, and then you're gonna pour it into a dish and cool it and cut them up into your caramels. And these are actually quite large caramels, so you can even make them smaller and have more of them. So this is just such a fun one to have around Christmas. I'm gonna actually talk about different ways that you can make it more, adding candy canes and things like that to them to make them more festive and seasonal. So let's get started. I'm going to teach you how to make 4-ingredient salted caramels for your holiday season. So you're actually going to be making these caramels in like a loaf pan. This is a little bit of a smaller loaf pan. It's like an 8.5 by 4.5. You can use a 9 by 5 though. You're just going to have thinner caramels. Okay, so what I like to do is I just like to put like some dabs of butter on the bottom of my dish, and then I cut a piece of parchment paper going lengthwise and a piece going this way, and I put a dab of butter in between the 2 pieces of parchment paper. And that just kind of holds it down when you're pouring the mixture into the pan. So that's just a quick tip before we kind of get into it. But I like to have this ready to go, and then we'll cook up our caramels and we'll pour them right into it. So we are just using some raw butter from our dairy cow, and we're just going to put it into our saucepan and turn it on like a medium heat, and we're just going to let that completely melt into the saucepan, and then we're going to add in our heavy cream. So as you can see, it's starting to melt there, so we're going to take our cream, and you want to get heavy whipping cream. Again, ours is just skimmed from our raw milk from our cow. Heavy whipping cream at the grocery store works fine. So we're just gonna melt that together for a second. We don't wanna bring it to a boil or anything like that. We just wanna heat it enough that it kind of melts together. And then we're gonna remove this from the heat. Yeah, so that's mixed together. We're just gonna give it a whisk. And now we're gonna remove that from the heat. So then we're gonna take our cup of sugar and pour that in. And you're just gonna take a 1/4 cup of water and just to hydrate the sugar a little bit so that it can come to a boil. So you're just gonna kind of stir that around. And the heat is still on medium, so we haven't turned the heat off. The trick here, this is kind of it's not hard, but this is kind of the trickiest part, is you want to make sure that all of the sugar is completely dissolved before it comes to a boil. And so what I find with that is you have to make sure that you scrape down those sides, because you don't want it to crystallize on the sides, and you don't want it to burn kind of on the bottom of the pan. So you're just gonna keep stirring this as it starts to heat up, because the most important part is we want all that sugar dissolved. We want all of it scraped down off the sides before it starts to boil. And then once it starts to boil, we are hands off. We are not touching this sugar again. It has to boil and simmer by itself. We're not stirring at all. So that's why it's so important to have that sugar dissolved before it starts to boil, because otherwise it will crystallize and stick to the bottom of your pan. Okay, so this is coming to a boil now. And I'm gonna stir it one last time to scrape down the edges. And then I'm gonna leave it. So you're gonna leave this alone in the pan to simmer until it reaches about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's gonna be like a soft amber color. So you'll see it's like starting to really bubble and kind of boil and do its thing. We are gonna completely leave it alone, and it is gonna change its color quite a bit from now until it's ready. And it's gonna be 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So how I check that is just with like a quick read thermometer. We're just going to put that right in the liquid, and you're gonna wanna make sure that you're not touching the bottom of the pot, which is hard because there's not a lot of liquid in there. But you're gonna try to just gently put it into the middle of the liquid. We're at like around 230 now. So we're just gonna let that boil and do its thing until it gets up to about 350. The trick with this, which I think is really important to note, is I've always find it hard to be completely hands off at this stage, but you're not stirring and doing anything to it. But it does hover between 230 and 250 for quite a while. And the reason for that is it's not really cooked yet. So it needs to really actually cook before it's done, and it will hover here until it starts to do that. So I still have my heat at like a medium high, and we're only up to 240, and it's been a little while. 245, I guess it's starting to climb now. But as it starts to cook, it will start to change its temperature, and it will go up a little bit faster at that point. So don't worry if it's hovering around that and it's not really doing much. Once it starts to change its color and get like a brownish amber color, it will start to climb in temperature a little bit quicker. So this gives you a little bit of a better idea. It will start to smell different as well. So I've turned the heat off. We're at about like 358, and it starts to almost smell, I don't want to say burning, but it has like a strong baked sugar smell. So at this point we are ready to move on to the next section. And you can see it's like quite a syrupy consistency and didn't stick to the bottom, so we are doing good. So okay. At this point we are ready to add in our milk and our butter. So we're just going to take that and pour it in, stirring constantly. And it's going to spit, it's gonna bubble. This is very, very hot, obviously. And you wanna stir it constantly because otherwise it will, yeah, you can see it's kind of spitting. And then we're gonna add in our salt. Okay, so keep stirring that. We don't want it to stick to the sides, and it will stick to the sides if you're not stirring. And so now we're gonna put this back on the heat, and we're just gonna heat it to 250. Once it gets to 250, it is cooked, but it's already starting to stick to the sides a little bit. So at this stage, you wanna be stirring it constantly. So right now we're at medium heat, and we're at about 160 degrees. And we're just gonna keep stirring, keep heating, and bring that up to 250. So it's just a dance of heating enough that it cooks, but not too much that it sticks to the sides and the bottom of the pan. And this will inevitably stick a little bit. There's a film, a crystallized film around the outside, and we don't really want that in our caramels, so it's okay, but we wanna make sure we minimize that as much as possible. And so we're up over 200 now, and we're just going to just occasionally keep stirring to make sure it's not sticking, but it shouldn't stick at this point. Once it comes to that boil, whatever stuck to the outside will obviously stay there, but no more should stick. So you're just kind of gently stirring occasionally, and it is going to, we're still at a medium heat. It's gonna come up over that 200 mark and start to boil a little bit, and then we are going to wait till it hits that magic number. At this point, it should really taste like a liquid version of a caramel. So it should smell really like lovely at this point, and you're just basically waiting. So this is almost ready to go, and you can see it's gotten quite dark and frothy. And if we hold this here, we're just about to 250. So I feel good about taking this off the heat at this point. And you can see when I take this out, like it is quite thick and syrupy on the end of this thermometer. So this is definitely ready to be cooled and made into our caramels. So now it's time to pour this into our pan, and you can see how thick it actually is. Okay, so we're just gonna pour that along the bottom and scrape it out, and really there should be very little that is stuck to the sides, maybe a bit of crystallized sugars, but otherwise this should pour out very easily and really nice and thick into this loaf pan. Okay, so, and then don't forget to lick your spatula because that's the best part. So now we're gonna just leave this to sit out. My parchment paper is curling in the corner, so those caramels are gonna be a little bit curled, but you wanna try to press those corners in the best you can so that they harden properly. Okay, so then we're just gonna leave that. It's about 3 hours, sometimes it's overnight, and then we can cut our caramels. I like to put them in the fridge for a bit just to kind of help speed up this process, but you don't have to. So we're just gonna tip them over, and I like to give them a little sprinkle with sea salt, or you can wait till they're done. And then we're going to slice them up into about 16 pieces. So try to make it as even as possible. I'm terrible at making things even, so it's not really a big deal because we're gonna be wrapping them individually. But we're going to try, I like to kind of like either like 4 or 5 strips here, and then start to cut them into our squares. So then you can just cut squares of parchment paper, and I'm not very good at this part because like I can never get the parchment the right size. This is even a little bit wider than it probably needs to be, but then you're just rolling up the caramels and twisting the ends. So the other thing that you can do with these, we just have sea salt on them right now, but you could crush up candy canes. You could roll them in candy canes. You could also freeze them and then dunk them in chocolate and then harden the chocolate. And then they would definitely have to be kept in the fridge, but then they could be like a chocolate caramel. So candy cane and chocolate, those are other options that you can do with this, but today we're just showing you the plain. I mean, there's probably lots of other options that you could do with this, but here is just like your plain, typical caramel, and then we wrap them in our parchment paper and we stick them in little baggies, and you can give them away as Christmas gifts to people.